You always make weird faces, so I thought I should this time.
I just rock with what I was given. Make the clock.
Oh, we never stop the dishwasher. It's so loud.
Amelia, get the dishwasher, kid.
Just pause it.
It's live, too, so everybody's listening to you sound like a putz.
Oh, hi, live people.
Springs, what's going on? Jazz man, hope you're well.
Hey, everyone.
Go Bulls, Spring Sports Card, Bulls fan in the 90s. Sean, what up? Exciting to talk about wrestling cards. Wrestling. 504.
Dude, you're killing me, Amelia.
Rip the damn thing open, please. There you go. There you go. Good evening. Uh-oh. Little beef. Beef. Keep it on wax, fellas. Keep it on wax. So what are we talking about tonight, Court?
So, I'm really excited. Tonight we are going to be talking all things wrestling. We have a guest that is...
I'm sorry, Jazz man. I'm sorry. Wasn't even thinking of that. Insensitive over here, the Chicagoans. My apologies.
I'm sorry, I get distracted. So, when you have a question about wrestling, when the people that we ask for questions about wrestling cards have questions about wrestling cards, they ask our guest. We're really excited. He's a cornucopia of knowledge, and we're going to be talking about vintage, modern prism tops, what the future of wrestling cards is going to look like. It's going to be...
I would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge Upper Deck as well, Courtney.
Upper Deck, yes. I actually was having a conversation about AEW today. So without further ado, I think we will have our guest join us. Zhan Mourning. Oh, he must have got bumped out. I guess we will have some further ado.
Hop on in, Zhan.
I love it.
Zhan. Manny, Brandon, what's good? How are you? There it is.
There it is.
Dick the Bruiser. That is. Courtney knows all about that and the wrestling. Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Great.
Thank you for joining us this late in the evening.
This is not late to me at all.
No?
Well,
No.
if we say you were just trying to be, I got it this early for us too. So, with that
I'm always
man,
super late working on stuff.
we really appreciate you jumping on. We've been hobby participants for a long time, and quickly as we were identifying counts that we want to follow, content that we want to consume, we came across your account very early, even though wrestling cards weren't
Not on our radar.
And
but we love wrestling.
We do.
Right.
We're gonna talk about that. I really want to talk about that. But came across your account, followed the pod, and have always enjoyed it. And then you were really close with like Drake's PC. We listened to Stacking Slabs. I know you've talked with Yam, and then you and I believe Yam Wax did a old school Panini wrestling stickers break. And we were fortunate enough to win a couple of packs, and in one pack we pulled like 3 rock stickers, which was pretty.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, which was pretty damn incredible. And so, recently there's been this incredible boom with wrestling cards, and I don't know how much of it is authentic. I don't know how much of it is just people trying to make a quick buck. But I will say that the people who it's real. Whatever's going on is real. There's a demand for wrestling cards. You can't get it. And it's for me, it's exciting because I respect people like you and Drake and Brett. And you guys have been out on wrestling, not 1, 2, but for years. And so it has to be a little bit of a great feeling being like, I always knew that this was awesome. Welcome to the party. So there's got to be a little bit of that like peacock or feeling good. But you're also a cool dude and you're welcoming. So I'm really excited tonight to talk about wrestling cards from way back to now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so we had some people in the comments saying that they listened to your podcast for the first time today, so that's exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited. So let's talk a little bit about you. your journey in the hobby, who you PC, and then we can go on to some. We get a ton of questions from our followers
Sure.
about wrestling cards. So
Pretty much like anybody else, I've been collecting anything and everything since I was a kid, but it's been different things. It started with sports cards, and then it was like Marvel cards, and then wrestling figures, and then as I got older, vinyl and CDs and cassettes, even sometimes 8 tracks, just like a bunch of obscure stuff. But wrestling itself has always been constant through that, whether it was the action figures, T-shirts, vinyl, music, the cards, obviously, programs, whatever it was that I was collecting, like wrestling found its way into all of those niches, no matter what I was doing. So and then of course, like most people, taking breaks periodically in between, but always getting back into it, and then always flipping some of that collection into the next one, which I know that's a taboo term for a lot of people, but that's how I've been able to fund a lot of the stuff. Is I bought stuff I thought was cool because I thought it was cool. It ends up being valuable down the road. Then I buy other stuff I think is cool, and that's just how it works. So wrestling itself just been a constant thread through everything, no matter what I've been doing ever. So
that's really exciting. So who do you PC for your wrestling?
Oh yeah, sorry, I should have answered that. Okay, I pretty much have 3 things that I have focused on. Number one is I have the complete set of the 82-83 Wrestling All-Stars I actually got from Matt Cardona, of all people.
Wow.
And I have that, but that's not enough for me. So I'm trying to chase down all the autograph versions, which some of them are impossible to get because the wrestlers are deceased.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to get all of those signed and then slabbed and then upgrade those as you can. Also, there's a set in the ECW action figures that came out in like 2000, and there's stickers and cards. And I'm trying to get all of those signed as well. So that's kind of one thing I've got going. The player PC I do is Karrion Kross, cut by WWE. Most know him probably as Killer Kross. And I'm a super collector of him. I probably would say I've got the best collection of his stuff. Really, I took that approach from Chris and Christina from Card Ladder on how they go after something to try to be the best at it. Maybe it's not the most popular or valuable, but it's something that you can get that's affordable and be the best at. I think I've got 4 or 5 of his one-of-ones now and a few different rainbows if you don't count the printing plates. And I've just had a blast going after his stuff. And then kind of my other section, I just call it singles. So it could be random stuff I pick up, whether it's sports, entertainment, wrestling. It's stuff I can buy, and then if I decide I want to get out of it, I get out of it. But it's like, you guys know how you pick up just singles, and it's not like I'm going after a complete set and then halfway through it I change my mind. So that's kind of my 3 lanes of the stuff that I collect.
I think the cool thing about the Cross collection of a card of his, he's quick to comment or retweet, and I think inevitably he's going to know that you're a super fan or a super collector, and it's going to be really easy, whether it's at a meet and greet or something, that you're going to have that awesome connection. So I think that's pretty awesome. And so Cross is like synonymous with us. So we've always ripped wrestling cards, but for us, it was never, wrestling cards wasn't part of the hobby. It was just something fun. We opened it. It was nostalgic. We reminisced about stories. But like, I know, and this was years ago, I think I might have sent you a couple Cross cards where I was just like, these don't belong to me. These belong to you.
Right.
And I think that's pretty damn awesome. You've been consistent with it.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, I had a couple things that I wanted to add. When you were talking about selling something and then moving into something else, Jeremy and I, we've been, PCing Pat Williams for a while now. Everyone knows it. They see it. We get tagged in posts with Pat Williams all the time. And today we were selling some of our Pat Williams cards. And I had like 3 people message me and be like, I thought that was you PC'd him. Why are you selling? I'm like, well, we moved into much like bigger cards of his. And these were like our first cards that we got, and now we've sort of outgrown them. And I think that a lot of people, like, I'm not going to hoard my stuff. Like, at some point we have so much that like the stuff that I'm not like super attached to, I let go and like let somebody else enjoy it. Like, that's sort of part of the hobby. So I know people get like, oh, you said flipping, but I look at more of like, I've enjoyed it. Now it's somebody else's turn to enjoy it. So I do agree with you there. And also your wrestling figures. So I had wrestling figures when I was a kid that I loved, but I don't know if you remember them. They were like the rubber ones where like the whole
the
thing
LJN.
Yeah. I don't know what they were called. I played with mine and like destroyed
Same.
them. You'd hit them together, and then you'd have like Hulk Hogan with like black streaks across his like chest because you hit him with the Bret Hart one so hard that the rubber came off.
That was the spray paint off the beard.
Yes.
Yep.
So I loved those things. They were so much fun. I grew up I grew up being a huge wrestling fan because my mom was a huge wrestling fan when I was a kid.
Yeah, I heard you on the Luke is a Tigers podcast talk about Ultimate Warrior, and I popped big time for that. I'm like, because most people hate Ultimate Warrior, like for different reasons, because he's not the greatest person outside the ring. Like, this guy is a complete character. He's a maniac. He's got this like one of the best wrestling physiques of all time. Like, I don't know how you don't like the guy, but I love hearing the story about that.
I know when I come home, if the kids are gone and then there's just like bright neon green and pink things that Courtney wants to tie around my biceps, that's like reverse role playing. Like, I know I'm the one that's getting in the little outfit and I'm going to run around shaking shit like it's going down.
No,
That's awesome.
I grew up, I loved him. He was like crazy. He looked big and like he was a wrestler. I loved his makeup and he was brightly colored. And I was,
okay, calm down there.
five. It was like kindergarten through like third grade that he was like really popular for me. And I had like the hug, like they were like stuffed animals.
Like the
they were
pillow ones?
Yes, I had
The wrestling buddies.
every night. So I was like, it is what it is, man. I loved Ultimate Warrior. And I know like as an adult, maybe he's a problematic person, back then, but I didn't care. Like, and that's the joy of these kinds of things. These are characters. So like the real person maybe isn't the greatest, but the characters who you fall in love with, and that's part of the nostalgia. I look back at it and I see someone that was like a hero to me when I was a kid, not like the real guy.
Right.
So let me ask you this. The phenomenon right now is Prism. A couple weeks ago, you could walk in and find Topps Finest sitting around and get it for a hobby box for $100. What do you make of this phenomenon? And everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's claiming it's shilled. There's the correlation, or people think that it's going to be the equivalent of 2012 Prism. What's going on? Like, what is your assessment as somebody who's been not only in the hobby, but in wrestling cards for an extended period of time? What are we to make of what's going on with Prism and WWE right now?
Everything that's happening, we all predicted. When I say we all, there's a handful of us that straddle the line between wrestling and like any other type of cards that are out there. So we'll just call it sports cards, because we saw what happened with the 2012 Prism. We know, but we're wrestling fans, so we just take that logic and we apply it to wrestling, and you could almost predict exactly what it was going to do. As far as the pricing, like we were telling people, the diehards in the wrestling community, it's gonna, if you get this for under $1,000 a box, you're gonna be lucky. And they said, oh, there's no way that's gonna happen. And sure enough, like it's already way past that right now, and it's only been out a couple weeks. So most of I wouldn't say most of us. There's a lot of us that predicted it, from pricing and all kinds of other things that we've seen going on, including the shilling. Like that's unfortunately that's just kind of something that's starting to be a common thing, and I'm hoping eBay is going to do something to change that. And of course, we've seen the singles, like the base card singles, start coming down also. That's also predicted. There's some people out there that kind of balk at some of the gold prisms of the 101s going for, 5 figures. And I'm like, that value could go up. Like that may be a floor pricing for that. And people say, oh, well, if you just wait, it'll come down. And I'm like, no, you don't understand gold prisms and how these things work. So it's been I would say the most interesting thing has been I'll call it clashing of styles, so to speak, between the traditional wrestling card community and the sports card guys that are coming into either one, just make money, which that's fine, whatever, or two, they're closet wrestling fans that have always been a wrestling fan. Maybe they were when they were a kid, but it took Prism for them to realize, I forgot how much I like wrestling, and there's actually some dollars to wrestling, which there always has been, but maybe just not enough zeros for some of them.
To me, I was thinking about it, and I was trying to make sense of everything in my head, and I've got these vivid memories of being at the Odeum for an ECW Friday night taping, watching Sabu and Sandman, and I remember 99.99 at Allstate Arena with Y2J, and I've got all these incredible wrestling experiences. I have these sports, traditional sports experiences that I remember. Then I've got these experiences that I remember vividly of being at the card shop. And it wasn't until recently that I never understood why they just never came to a head. And to me, it's almost like you said, a perfect storm where I was already in the hobby. I was collecting sports cards. We were wrestling fans. I mean, hell, we were up in Milwaukee for Road to WrestleMania years ago when Rusev had the big push. My son was crying because John Cena was getting the hell beat out of him. I'm cheering for Rusev, knowing that there's a hot tag coming. And just like, in the last year we've dabbled, we picked up some wrestling cards, but in our mind, the wrestling cards were different than the other cards within our collection. And I think now with like the prospecting, everybody wants Braun Breaker. And like how many times have wrestlers been pushed that never amounted to anything? But to me, it's almost like a perfect storm because there are a lot of, for lack of a better term, closeted wrestling fans.
So I have a question.
I guess I'm done with my question. Go ahead,
Never
Courtney.
stop talking. You that wasn't a question. It was like a long statement.
Okay.
So with all of this being said, and the nostalgia and the price bump with Prism and everybody kind of coming in, and we saw that, like you were talking, with other sports cards, where like everybody was like buying the base, Jaws and Zions, and those prices went crazy, and then people were like, I can't afford this. So then they started looking back at older sets, and they looked at like vintage cards. Do you think we're going to see like an uptick in prices for vintage cards as people like realize that they're priced out of Prism, but they still want in on the action, just like we did with like the Kobe's and the Jordans and all with basketball?
To an extent, I think you're first going to see some, I don't even know if rising prices maybe, but popularity of the Topps Chrome and Topps Finest. Like that's going to be an easy transition for people who can't get Prism or priced out. They can just look back to this past year and find that stuff for still, somewhat affordably. But, as you guys have said, like the prices on those boxes have already gone up if you can even find them. As far as the vintage stuff, like that's my bread and butter. And it's funny because in wrestling, like vintage is like considered like 80s stuff and sometimes 90s stuff. But when you look at like vintage baseball, it's like 100 years ago, but 80s stuff maybe isn't quite vintage. So it's an interesting discussion because wrestling cards just haven't been around as long as a lot of these other things. But something interesting, I think, with the vintage stuff, I think there will be some of it that picks up based on the talent. So it's really going to depend on age group, I think. People in their, I would say, mid-20s and older, probably they know The Rock, Steve Austin, Hogan, Ric Flair. Those guys all have transcended pop culture at this point. But I think some of the other vintage stuff could be legends according to some wrestling fans, but they don't transcend the mainstream. So they may have been huge back in the territory days in the 70s and 80s, but maybe the younger people don't get to see them. Now, the argument you could make to that is, well, there's people out there still buying vintage baseball and they never got to see them play, and they understand the sets and specific names and stuff like that. So maybe, I hope so, because I love wrestling history. I say it all the time. I don't think people respect wrestling history enough and like to go back and watch a lot of the old stuff, whether it's 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever. So many people just want to be force-fed content of any kind, and they don't like to go back and kind of discover what their own flavor is, because wrestling's like music, has different things for different people. So it'll be interesting, but I think Topps Chrome, that's going to be the first thing that really starts going up, and that's from the past. The first WWE Topps Chrome was Heritage Chrome in 2006, but the 2014 and 15, that's a huge set. So
wrestling fans are lunatics, though.
Oh
yeah. They will pay 5 figures to go have a WrestleMania experience, and anytime that we sell at a show, as long as your numbers aren't outrageous, if there's something that they want, they pay for it without haggling.
Yeah.
Right.
And we know a lot of like really like die-hard wrestling fans. We have people who used to like have like WrestleMania parties with like ring girls coming like to their house, and like huge
rooms dedicated, rooms set up like a ring.
Like seriously, I think some of our hobby friends now, if I could show them the stuff that these people, the wrestling figures that some of our friends have, they would probably literally shit their pants and be like, I cannot believe these people have all of this. Like, it's insane. Like, they have like actual costumes that like wrestlers.
Nice.
It's probably one of the most epic collections that I've ever seen of anything, really.
Yeah, that's cool.
It is a different type of party. I promise you, it's a different type of party.
So as a long time, so as a longtime collector, right? Is there a little bit of annoyance with these new people coming in, buying up some of this product and behaving in a certain way, or do you take it with a grain of salt, understanding that, like, you know, they're probably at the net result is they're helping the value of your collection or bringing more awareness to what is wrestling card hobby?
Yeah, several different angles. First off, I'm not annoyed at all. I got one Prism hobby box, and I bought it just to sit on. I'll eventually sell it. I don't rip product generally. Occasionally I'll buy into a break or something, but very rare that I do that. Um, this is what we've been wanting for years: is wrestling cards to finally get the recognition that, hey, we are F1, we're Pokemon, we're all these other ancillary things. We're just as important as those other categories. And a lot of people are annoyed from, I would say more so from the wrestling. There's two different sides. Like, the wrestling fans are saying, okay, all the flippers are coming in and taking away from the true collectors. And my response to that is, it's a business. People are out here to feed their families and do what they got to do. They're not here for the collectors. So that's on them to put in the work to, buy whatever they need for their collection. And if that means they go back and buy vintage, it's cheaper, or completely get out of the hobby, we don't want to see that. But that's what my one perspective. The other side is people in the traditional sports cards thing. I think they say, well, wrestling's not a true sport. It can't be categorized. It's not worth what people are paying. And then my reaction to that is, okay, well, what about Marvel and Pokemon? Like, that's in the same realm we're talking about here. And yet people don't balk at those prices when they're six figures. So, I see all sides. That's one thing that I like to do with my content. And anytime I'm interacting with people, I can have strong opinions on things, but I also, since I buy and sell a lot of sports cards, I'm not necessarily a sports card person. I, dabble, but I buy and sell a lot. So I see what's going on in a lot of that stuff. And I can kind of see both sides, as opposed to a lot, coming in from one side or the other and just being so strongly opinionated on that. So overall, I think it's great. We've got people talking about us in the mainstream now, and people are making some big money. People are making big sales to then fund other things in their collection. So I think it's great. But again, I'm not your traditionalist. So,
what impact did AEW have, if any, on the sports card hobby?
Big time. And the biggest thing is marketing. Upper Deck has gone above and beyond on their TV show and in publications, stuff like that, to produce, hey, we've got AEW cards coming out. This is our first product, blah, blah, blah. And you said it earlier, how diehard wrestling fans are. And I think AEW wrestling fans are like that amplified. Like, they hate WWE traditionally. They're just so diehard in their guys. So, and they buy all kinds of stuff. They chase down all the figures and they do that. So when the cards came out, all of a sudden you start seeing another thing we've been wanting forever, and that's wrestling fans to come out and actually start buying the cards. Because you guys have said it, they'll throw down thousands on shirts and 8x10 signed and ring worn gear and all these things, but like, it hasn't transitioned to trading cards very well at all. So that was great. And then when Prism kicked off, there you go. When Prism kicked off, I was like, you know what I think's going to happen is a lot of these AEW fans are going to see these fancy parallels and colored and autographed stuff, and they're going to say, hey, I like Adam Cole. Adam Cole had Topps Chrome and Topps Finest. He didn't have Prism, but I can go pick up Chrome and Finest. So then they're going back and buying some of the Topps products, just expanding the collection and getting more into it. And honestly, I think it's done nothing but help. And then for the first time ever, we've seen Prism advertisements on WWE TV. Up until this time, they had Topps Chrome had one advertisement on an NXT show one time, I believe, ever. And that's the only time we've ever seen trading cards advertised on. So I think that's going to have to do a lot with it. I really wish they would start selling them at the merch tables at live events. Maybe that's something they're going to start doing once kind of Prism starts going out. And then, of course, Fanatics taking over, you would think that you'll start seeing some cards there too. But overall, I think AEW kind of, with the Upper Deck thing, kind of kicked it off, getting it into wrestling fans' eyes, getting in front of them. Hey, these products are out there. There are other things you can buy.
So I think that's interesting what you said about selling it at the show, especially with Fanatics. And I do see that being something because Fanatics is very much, they talk about being direct to consumer. What's more direct to consumer than having the cards at the shows, at like where the consumers that really take this in are going to be? That makes the most sense.
Can you imagine picking up a box at like a Royal Rumble or a WrestleMania where there's a limited print run and pulling like a numbered or a short print out of that?
Like an event, like an event card.
Well, I can give you one example, and this is just completely random. I bought a collection from someone recently, and I pulled a bunch of playing cards, like a deck of cards, and it had the wrestlers on it. So I was like, where did this come from? And I messaged the person who sold to me, and they said these cards were only available at this one event, and that was it. You could not get them anywhere but that event. And yeah, I know they're not traditional trading cards because they're playing cards, but it still has the image. And you guys know as well as I do, there are playing cards in slabs of all different categories that people are collecting. And the fact that you could only get it at that live event was something that I was like, you know what, they could really do some really cool collectibles if they started marketing it like this. So I hopefully Fanatics is going to kind of steer it in the right direction with that kind of stuff.
Are there any wrestling cards over in Japan? I know like where I would be looking for, like if I was looking for either arbitrage opportunities or if I was prospecting, wrestling is absolutely massive in Japan. And I was wondering if they have any sort of cards over there as, something like if I were prospecting, that's kind of where I would be looking to see, because occasionally like a Shinsuke or somebody with a buzz comes over and, can you talk about that at all? Or is there anything going on over there?
There's been, I mean, that's another thing with wrestling cards. I won't get too far into right now, but if it comes up in the conversation tonight, it's one thing it's got that's different than sports cards is there's so much that is sought after, rare, and valuable that is not traditional. It could be food issued cards. It could be hand cut paper cards. It could be foreign cards, like you said. One of the most valuable Rob Van Dam and Sabu cards are from a 1995 BBM, which is Baseball Magazine in Japan, and they put out wrestling sets almost every year. I don't follow that stuff as much as I should or used to, but I know they're out there. Stardom, which does it's women's wrestling. There's a huge promotion. They do a huge set for that, and there's one of my favorite things. I love Atsushi Onita because I love 90s deathmatch wrestling. So I got a lot of his cards and his rookie cards and first and all that kind of stuff. But they are out there. But the thing with wrestling that's, if you want to go with sports cards or, even like ancillary stuff, you can generally go find checklists. But some of this stuff, like it's so rare and so hard to find that, that there was like one of the more rare sets out there is actually a Panini set from 1995. And I think there's only like 2 people that have a complete set. That's it. So, a lot of people want to say vintage wrestling is not good or junk or, people artificially make it rare based on grades. But when you only have a couple of people that even have a complete set of it, I mean, that's rarity in itself. So to answer your question a long way around, yes, there are foreign cards out there, but I don't have a lot of information because it's not something I go after all the time. But it's something that keeps collectors digging because there's so much out there and variations in information and all kinds of things like that.
My introduction to like the death matches came in like the mid to late 90s. There was a VHS called Stranglemania, and it was all these death matches with the narration by the Insane Clown Posse. So it was just like what you were hearing was absolutely insane. What you were watching was absolutely insane. But it was, I don't think I ever laughed, cried so much in my life, and then just in complete amazement of what I was seeing.
I look forward to ICP coming out with their own wrestling cards because I can't believe that they haven't done it already.
That would be great. And independent wrestling, we haven't even touched on that yet, but just briefly, there's a whole sector of wrestling card collectors who just collect independent stuff. They don't want AEW, they don't want WWE unless they're, buying it because it's a good arbitrage to then buy their indie sets. But indie sets are rare and sought after, and there's chase cards and autographs and all these things. So it's nuts right now.
We're from Chicago originally, the Chicago suburbs, and I would love nothing more than like a CM Punk Ring of Honor card. That would be so cool if there was something like that was out there. I don't know if there is, but for us that would be
cool. AEW has, they own Ring of Honor. Tony Khan owns Ring of Honor, so I don't know if they can somehow fit Ring of Honor into Upper Deck, and then all of a sudden Ring of Honor starts doing their own cards through Upper Deck. Like that could be something really cool.
I think on a side note, him picking up that library of those old matches was just absolutely spot on.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I so where we used to live there, my upstairs neighbor was like, he did like house shows. He was like a amateur wrestler, and we used to go like the VFWs and watch him wrestle with like all those guys. Like those are the kind of things that I feel like just drives wrestling fans. That kind of stuff, like watching those guys like get out there, like you're like two like. Everybody's like really close and they're flipping out of the ring and landing on the ground at the VFW. I'm like, that's not really padded. But I remember that like being some of the coolest stuff. And so when it comes to that, and people are so passionate about it, and we were talking about like the Japanese sets and like all the random things, do you think, like, obviously Prism because it's like crazy right now, but do you think like unlicensed stuff like Leaf is going to have a pop too now because of everything going on with wrestling? Like we picked up a 1-of-1 Hulk Hogan the other day because it was super cool, but it was, it was unlicensed.
With so many weird products. Oh, for example, I found, and this isn't, I'm not breaking any news here. Most of the collectors know about this, but there's a whole, I think it's a German Disney licensed WWF cards. And it's like one sheet. It's like a perforated sheet. So I found an Ultimate Warrior one the other day. And so it was Ultimate Warrior. Everything's in German with a Disney logo on it. Like, how cool is that? Because it's so random, and like, nobody balks at that. So if they're not balking at that, like most people, the traditional wrestling card community doesn't seem to balk at unlicensed because there's just so much random stuff out there that they're collecting already. And another thing is like a lot of the talent that we see in AEW or WWE now is at those shows you were just talking about, where there's a couple hundred people there maybe. Everybody's crammed together. Maybe they are selling cards at their merch table. You get those autographed. And it kind of goes back, and going back to our conversation earlier about prospecting and rookie card logos and stuff like that kind of stuff, indie stuff, I'm going to wrap all of that together in that it's kind of like prospecting from that perspective. But the difference is with wrestling cards is whether these guys make it to WWE and Hall of Fame or whether they wrestle for 2 more years and retire, the people who are collecting these cards seem to just keep with it. They stick with it. They're fans for life because they're fans of the character or they're fans of the moment or the promotion, as opposed to the flash in the pan, what's going to make me money now kind of thing. So, yeah, the unlicensed stuff, I actually see like certain grading companies making a bigger difference than maybe an unlicensed product.
Interesting.
So how do you prospect when it comes to wrestling? Because it's not just wins and losses, right? And you can be the greatest talent in the world, but in my mind, if you don't have somebody who's your adversary, if there isn't like the Stone Cold to The Rock or Stone Cold with Vince, maybe Stone Cold doesn't ever become who he is. So like if you're talking about prospecting when it comes to wrestling,
well,
what
and
are you
also, is it
looking
like
for?
the first Stone Cold card, or is it the first card he was ever on? Like, there's lots of people that switch their characters. Is it that card? Is it the cards like if you find a Stone Cold from when he was wrestling in VFWs? Is that his rookie card? Is that more valuable? Does it depend on each individual wrestler? I feel like there's so much nuance.
Yeah, there is, and maybe that's another reason why a lot of people don't get into it, because they get into it. Okay, I hate the debate, but we'll talk about it. They jump into it. Okay, where do I start? Well, let's start with a rookie card. What's the rookie card? Okay, there's 5 different things that people are considering. Well, I don't want to mess with any of that. I'm going to get out of here and go do something else, which, it's something I've said in sports cards too. Like, a lot of the coolest cards out there are not rookie cards. Some are, some aren't. Some of the rookie cards aren't as valuable as some of the other, like, just maybe it's even after their playing years, but it's like a rare parallel. It just looks cool, or a color match, or jersey number, something like that. So that's something that I think that wrestling cards that have, like, even if you try to prospect, if you truly like the talent, like, it doesn't matter per se, as long as you know what you're spending, because you're going to be a fan for life. But Prism is going to open the door for that because of the rookie card logo. Topps did that. I'm sure you guys know, you've seen the rookie card thrown all over the place, but that's the problem, is they threw it on all. I mean, you had AJ Styles cards with rookie card logos, even though he's been wrestling for like 10 years, 15 years before he comes to the WWE. You know what I mean? So it's it's kind of all over the place. But with I think Panini really went out of their way to dictate what actually is the rookie cards in their first set, whereas AEW, the guys behind the team behind those cards just they flat out said on interviews, it's too hard for us to try to determine if this is this person's first card, so we're just not going to do that. And I think that kind of slowed some of the card growth down on that side, because everybody knows the rookie card logo and everybody wants that. And then whether you want to try to make money off that because you think that Gable Steveson or Braun Breaker is going to be the next Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, whatever. Like, that's kind of your prerogative. But there's a lot of people out there in wrestling cards that are picking somebody they love, whether they're really popular or not, and they're just going all in, like trying to get rainbows and super collecting or whatever it is. So it is going to be a little bit more doable now to try to prospect, but whether it's successful, I think that's going to depend on your prerogative, really, and how you collect.
I mean, we're doing that with Dewdrop. Like, it was so stupid. Like, we had a break, and now I'm following like every Dewdrop card on eBay. Literally, as we were going on one of the autographs that I wanted, it went, and I totally forgot to go bid on it. And I'm like, oh, I missed my autograph. So
Drake knows.
Yes.
Drake knows.
See, that's
give me 3 eggplants, Drake.
That's the thing. But like, these cards are coming out, and they're gonna say, they're her rookie, but then she was, Piper Naveen. Like, she's got tons of other cards.
Some Japanese cards too.
Yeah. I've seen tons of sets of her cards where it's like she's got a different name. I just think that it's so hard, and that's where, like, I think you'll get into the people you're going to see a separation, in my opinion, of like the people who are collecting now and like are maybe in it because they like sports cards and now they're getting into wrestling, versus people who have been collecting wrestling forever or have been following wrestling forever and are getting into the cards, and they're like, well, this isn't the first year they ever wrestled, this was. And so then they go back and look for cards. So there's so much more ability with wrestling cards to just like kind of veer off in your own direction.
Well, and I've said this numerous times, and I still stand by it. The one thing that it might sound like I'm biased or something, but wrestling cards are timeless. When you, it's just what you said. You could pick up a card from any era, and you can either go backwards or forwards or neither, and just appreciate what you have because it means something to you in that moment, that character, that time period, whatever it was. And the perfect example I always bring up, and most people can't dispute me on this, how many times do you guys go back and watch a WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, an ECW pay-per-view, a random, 80s or 90s wrestling you find on YouTube, and you just sit there and have fun with it? Where as opposed to a lot of the traditional sports, like if you're a diehard collector of a team or a player, like how often are you going back and watching something from 15 years ago? Like, most of the time you're not. So that's another thing that I love about wrestling cards, just they're timeless, no matter where you're getting into them or what price point.
One of our favorite things and we've both acknowledged this recently, when we go live, the most fun, the absolute most fun we have is when we do free wrestling breaks.
Yes.
We give away free packs, and we just rip wrestling, and everybody tells stories. And like last time, it was like when I was a kid and I was a huge Tatanka fan, and Ludwig Borga beat him with illegal body shots. And
nice.
I'm never going to Helsinki. To hell with that place. Bunch of dirty scumbags. But I remember that, and like everybody had a good laugh, and that's like where the Dewdrop came, and like Otis and like the Thick. Like, it's just a good damn time, man. It really is. It like
you're more connected to memories than an actual like event, I think. Like what you were doing, like you remember what you were doing when you were, watching like that particular WrestleMania or that cage match when, like it's just all the things that it's more, I think, visceral, I guess. Like nobody's gonna want to go back and watch a Super Bowl from like 1982, like ever. Like that's like, but I'll go back and watch those wrestling. No.
On the flip side too, it's going to allow, like, especially with Prism, like it's going to allow so many traditional sports card collectors to just pick one card, like whether it was Hogan or Andre or The Rock, Shawn Michaels, no matter who it is, they don't have to go out and become a full-blown collector. This release allows them to go pick up a really cool parallel of their favorite person, throw it in a slab or throw it in their binder or collection, whatever it is they do, and like just it's a piece to their collection without them having to be fully engulfed in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally get it. Jeremy, somebody who said that? Hail Mary. Jeremy one time was over at his friend's house who had just refinished their garage, and they decided to have WrestleMania in the garage, and Jeremy threw himself through their brand new drywalled wall. So
no, they nasty Irish whip into the wall, man. And if I learned one thing, if you're gonna be good at wrestling, you have to sell, man.
Yeah, take your
You
bumps.
have to sell. I take bumps, man. I'm putting people over. You know that.
Yeah.
But on a side note, like, this was a family who spent money they didn't have to finish a garage, and I fucking put a massive hole right through it. And then I was just like, I was a dumb knucklehead kid. I was just like, yep, time to go. That is your problem, dude. Peace out, and I will see you later.
We all have stories like that, though. If you're a wrestling fan, I remember like beating the crap out of my brother when he used to be littler than me. And then Amelia, she'll try me sometimes, and I got a Russo for her, so I'm like just sitting on her back with her chin. I'm like, look, I can still take you. Don't start.
I remember the night, and this isn't going too far back, but there was somebody. Miss Kitty, remember her?
Yeah.
And there was like the pay-per-view where it was rumored. So like I grew up and there was a website called Raja. And Raja was like gospel. That's where you went to, and it was rumored that the puppies were going to be shown. And I remember that night, the house I was going to, the dad like canceled it and said nobody could watch it. And we used to have like these boxes that you had to order the pay-per-view, and none of us had it. And so like I was an adolescent, dude. And so, like, I went home and I'm missing out on the puppies. I'm missing out on the puppies. Life sucks, and I'll never recover. And did all right,
I remember that whole era.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really like what drives the cards too. I mean, every single person that if I post something or if I see something posted, either they're responding to me or I'm responding to them, and it's always like, I remember that. I remember this character. I remember that moment. Yeah, so you guys pretty much summed it up exactly why I think these are timeless, and hopefully they're just going to get bigger and bigger within I'll just call it the hobby, because there's, so many different types of things you can collect, but wrestling cards just continue to stay with me more than anything else.
I remember my neighbor and I used to watch wrestling all the time, and then one day his mom told me he wasn't allowed to come over and watch wrestling anymore because it was making him too aggressive. And I was like,
yeah.
Like that's
yeah, I got that too. I also had to stop watching. There's 2 times I remember being told I couldn't watch it anymore. The first was when Brian Pillman pulled a gun on Stone Cold Steve Austin on live TV, and the second one was the barbed wire match between Terry Funk and Sabu. Like, both of those were on regular TV, and I remember specifically them being turned off and being told, "You're not watching wrestling anymore." But here I am.
No, my mom never said that. Even when Mankind's, was it his tooth came out of his nose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
Hell in the Cell.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember being horrified.
So in my opinion, Sabu is one of the most underrated wrestlers, or at least unappreciated wrestlers of all time. And maybe that's I think people who were diehard ECW fans, you kind of like what AEW to WWE is now.
Right.
Like, I always felt like, why doesn't this guy ever get the recognition or the love that he deserves? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, and it's like, it's not even. And again, maybe this is because I'm like too far into it, but even before ECW, when he was doing deathmatch stuff in FNW and like independent stuff, like, I remember talking to Dan Severn from the UFC. And him and Sabu had an NWA title match at some random independent show in, like, I want to say it was like 1995. And he was talking about how crazy Sabu was. And I'm just like, people don't, like, I think they just associate him with, like you said, ECW tables and all that stuff, which of course that's what he kind of is known for. But he's got so much other things that he's done over the course of his career. And I totally agree with you. Like, I don't understand. But then my argument with that goes back to, like, Jerry the King Lawler. Like, he's one of the biggest wrestling stars in the territory. Like, in some parts of the country, he was as big, if not bigger, than Hulk Hogan. And people don't realize that because they just haven't gone back and watched a lot of the Memphis stuff, which, if you're unfamiliar, Memphis was basically like an 80s version of ECW, and people just don't realize that. And they don't go back and watch it, which it's all over YouTube. They have the Tupelo, Mississippi concession stand brawl was really popular. There was like jars of pickles getting busted on guys' heads and mustard and all this stuff. It was very entertaining, but there's so many people that are just underappreciated, I think.
Well, is the cards start to boom right now? I think naturally people who are legitimately here and here to stay will naturally make their way and eventually learn about, because somebody like are probably just going to recognize Jerry as kind of just being like, like a shill for Vince and doing
Right.
commentary.
Like
and then,
creep.
yeah, and they're naturally going to go back and find out like who's,
Yeah, I can see that.
you just don't respect the game.
I didn't. I was like, ew, this guy is such a creep.
So what are some of your fondest wrestling memories?
Oh man, the night that Scott Hall jumped the barrier in WCW, I was watching TV when that happened, and I'm like, why is this WWF guy invading WCW? And then 2-3 weeks later, whatever it is, we start seeing the NWO form. So that was one thing. Speaking of jumping the rails, I remember watching Raw one night, and I see some random guys jumping the rail, and next thing I know, Paul Heyman's in the ring and start talking about ECW, and I'm like, what is this ECW? That opened the floodgates to that and tape trading and Japanese wrestling and all that kind of stuff. So that's two things. One of the big things more recently, and it really sucked me in, was Matt Cardona and Nick Gage and their whole deathmatch thing. Like, I did not think Matt Cardona was going to show up, and then he shows up, and they worked that whole angle in GCW, and I was like, this is the first time I remember a legitimate WWF star being in a death match in an indie, and it was just unbelievable to me. So there's like these little. Another thing was the pay-per-view where Cody and Dustin Rhodes battled it out and had that bloodbath in AEW. So that was huge. There's just like so many of those little sporadic things like that where like it's something that just sticks with me and never goes away. Like, I'll always go back and watch all kinds of wrestling, but those are some moments that stick with me. And, I can pull out the card and remember, like, it just sends me right back. So
I think one thing, and this is the way I would look at it, this is just the way my brain works, is I would have a conversation like this. I would think about some of those memories, and then I would go and look for the cards. So as we're thinking about this, one thing that I always thought was intriguing when you mentioned Paul Heyman jumping in the ring was when Mike Awesome, as the ECW champion, showed up on Nitro, still as the champion, then had to wrestle almost 6 days later or 5 days later at a pay-per-view where you knew he was going to lose the title, and I think Taz just whipped his ass in like a squash match. But like, I remember just thinking like, well, what the hell's going on? Here he is on TNT with the ECW strap, and then he's going to turn around and come back. That sticks with you.
So I have one thing that I feel like I would be remiss not to mention, especially since I was just on Lucas, Tigers, and Bronze talking about women in the hobby. Women in wrestling are, in like the last decade even, I mean, before that for sure, but like even in the last decade, you have like Charlotte Flair headlining, a pay-per-view. These women are just as famous now as the male wrestlers, and people are tuning in to see the women's matches, and they're athletic and they're gorgeous and they're funny and they have characters and charisma. They're not just like standing on the sidelines like being a manager or like whatever, so, or eye candy or showing their puppies. They're like, this is a really good way.
Run, panties, mama.
This is a really good way, in my opinion, to have these, and you can say it's entertainment, sports entertainment, it's not real. These people are athletic. They are athletes, and they are out there, and you have these women who are out there being amazing athletes and drawing in like young girls. My daughter loves wrestling. That's like one thing, she will sit and watch wrestling with us all the time. So I always find it interesting, like, this is a good way to draw more girls into collecting cards. In my opinion, just wrestling cards alone will do that. Mm-hmm. And then once they start, women start collecting wrestling cards, that can draw them into other parts of the hobby. So I feel like the boom in wrestling cards is really great to bring, more diversity into the hobby in general.
Yeah, 100% agree. And up until, I would say up until we started seeing this run with Roman Reigns currently, the focus really on modern wrestling cards has been all the women's cards. Like, some of the most expensive cards sold of the last 5 years were always like refractors or autos, low numbered stuff of Sasha, Becky, Alexa, those kind. So when we started seeing the tide turn a little bit with the Roman stuff just going above and beyond, right. And then starting to see some Seth Rollins stuff selling for higher, Austin Theory is getting popular. So it's been interesting, but up until then, that's kind of the argument I've had this whole time is like the women's wrestling cards sell for so much. They're so popular. Even base cards still sell really well for, you know, a couple of bucks a piece, which you can't say that for everything. And it's a great gateway to younger girls or, you know, adult women or whoever. Like if it's something they can latch onto that they can somehow relate to, whatever that may be, I think it's a great way. And honestly, if we're, I can't say it for all promotions, but specifically WWE, like the women's wrestling, as far as like the stories, the matches, everything is way better than most of the guys' stuff. So
I agree. We actually were talking. There was like a couple years, like when Roman was like not a heel, and he was like with Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose. When Jeremy could not stand him back then, but at that time,
still can't.
He still can't. But at that time, all the women's matches were more athletic. They were more entertaining. The story, like you were saying, the storylines were better. You were like I was invested, and then they had the show.
Yeah, that was like think of like
show.
Charlotte Flair, Bayley, Sasha Banks, like NXT time frame.
Oh,
where
yeah.
like you would turn in and you would get like a 30-minute match that was just the storytelling, the execution, the bumps was just, it was class.
Yeah.
Well, and when you listen to them talk, like they talk you into watching the matches, which is something that the guys are not doing. The guys feel like outside of Roman and Brock and a few others, there's so many of them that just, you know, you can like mentally see them with a piece of paper in front of them reading off the script. Whereas I feel like the women you just mentioned, like they're just so talented that I don't know if it's a script or if it's off the cuff, but they're able to talk me personally into watching the matches. And then when I get to the match, they're over delivering. So it's the women's stuff right now in WWE is top notch. Like that's the main reason I tune in outside of Roman and Brock and whoever's like right there at the top of the card.
I actually love Brock as like with his new like,
as a face. Brock is great.
I love him. I like him
Yeah.
so much better. Like it's so funny too because you see the tides shifting. You're like
him tormenting Sami Zayn was just absolutely like hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Before we bounce off the female subject, what's a female wrestler that maybe your average wrestling fan isn't aware of that they need to look out for? Like for me, like I'm kind of fascinated with Nikita. And then there's a girl who I've never actually seen her wrestle other than highlights, like Bordeaux or something. And she's in like these indie leagues. She's got almost 750,000 followers, but she's a badass, man. Like this, and she's absolutely stunning, which is probably a package for success.
Yeah, Nikita and NXT, that's an automatic. Like and her first card actually was just available on Panini Instant over the weekend. And the low number parallels, they sold out real quick. So that's but hey, it's got the rookie card logo. It's a non-official set release. So that's something that's got going for it. But Jade Cargill in AEW has a huge following, and she had the title forever. I think she still has it. Because I am so busy with doing all kinds of stuff. I like consume as tons of wrestling, but I do it in like short bits or highlights or however I can do it. So sometimes I'm not like up on the very most modern thing, but I think Jade still has a title in AEW, but people love her. And I still think a lot of the like mainstream collectors aren't looking at some of the AEW stuff. And I mean, you know, on the flip side, there's not a lot of it out there yet. So that's kind of, you know, they're going to be putting out some, Drake just said Jade's still undefeated. So there you go. There's the answer to that question. So, those are the two, Nikita and Jade Cargill, that stand out for me. But then there's so many, like if you want to go back to WWE for a minute, like Shotzi, I thought was going to be huge. Like she's just got the look. She's very marketable, stands out, you know, driving a tank the last person that drove a tank to the ring was Rusev. So she's got like that character-based stuff going. People love her, but she's just not on TV as much. So I'm not sure about her, but if I have to pick one, Nikita.
I had a dog named Nikita over a Russian wrestler that my mom was in love with back in
Nikita Koloff?
Yes. Yep. Not a lot of people would have known that, but my mom loved him. And the dog had big blue eyes, and he had big blue eyes. And my mom always liked like the hairy, like sweaty, oily guys are her favorites. Like, you're not
okay,
like...
enough of what your mom's lusting after. You're burying the lead. I said something smart, and somebody as smart as Zhan agreed and said like Nikita was a good look.
I love wrestling, and like this has been so much fun. Like I could do like another hour just talking about this, but We typically only do an hour. Maybe you'll join us again. Actually, we were talking before we jumped on here. We were thinking about doing another free wrestling break like we did with Drake, and we didn't know if maybe you'd like to join us to do it like we did with him.
Anytime we can get something scheduled, I'm happy to jump on and do anything wrestling hobby related content. So,
all right.
I really appreciate that. And then I want to close with this. I want to ask you, and I invite anybody in the comments for their opinion. Who is? I was thinking about this in preparation. Who is the most, in your mind, important person to wrestling?
Ooh,
Vince McMahon.
That's what I came to.
You think? I see. I would have said like Hulk Hogan.
There would be no Hulk Hogan if there was no Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon's the world.
There wouldn't, but would there be a Vince McMahon if Hulk Hogan wasn't so insanely popular in Hulkamania and all that stuff? Because I feel like he kind of drove that.
He was still stealing all the talent from all the other territories, though. So if Hulk didn't want to do it, I think he would have made somebody the star.
True.
And so I was thinking about this, and then I was like, Vince to me has always been the guy. The way he walks,
Yeah.
fired. Like the bumps he takes, the stuff he says, like when he's getting beat with a bedpan, and he's like pissing his pants, and Stone Cold's pulling that. Like even just recently, like WrestleMania to me, the highlight was Vince getting in the ring and taking off the shirt. Like everybody knew what was coming, but it was fucking incredible that he did that. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go after Vince, but I know Drake has the one-on-one autograph. Everybody's talking about his Roman card. You couldn't pay me to take the Roman Reigns card, but God, I would open up the checkbook to get the Vince card.
Yeah, the Vince transcendent stuff is really nice.
I'm gonna tell you, Vince is the kind of person for me that like you love to hate him. Like I always thought he was such a dick.
I strongly disagree. I love to love Vince.
He's hilarious, but he's always such a jerk. Like it's so funny. But you have all these emotions tied to all of these people, and you're so but you're invested in it all.
You would think Courtney loves Warrior, so you think she would just be like super jazzed by the genetic jackhammer, Vinnie Mac. But even so you mentioned Chris and Christina earlier, right? And right. I know one thing that I picked up from Chris was when he talks about escapism. Like this evolved into us just sharing wrestling stories, having some laughs. The comments are awesome. And you could get a bunch of people on the live and just talk about wrestling moments. And truly for the last 1 hour, I didn't think about work. I didn't think about EBITDA. I didn't think about profit margin. I didn't think hey, I hope Luis Robert hit a home run so I can sell a card. It was just good times talking about wrestling, having fun. And guess what? If you like the card, it's great. If it goes up in value, even better. But if not, who gives a shit? You've got something that you like, and there's something attached to it.
Agreed, 100%.
We would love nothing more than to have you back for a live break. It would be on your behalf, and really appreciate what you do for the hobby and the wrestling community. I think it's awesome, and I do think it's going to come together more and more. And I think that you're going to be you, Drake, Brett, and I'm sure I'm missing some really prominent figures, but I think it's awesome representation for the community.
He hit a home run?
No, Vladdy.
Lucas said he hit a home run. I don't watch. That's what we need. All the runs. So we appreciate you for joining us. Thank you so much. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before we end
no.
this?
Yeah, where can the people follow you?
Yeah, let's do that.
Pretty much. Obviously here on Instagram, that's probably the main thing. Wrestling with Cards on YouTube. That's where my main content hub is. Please subscribe. Trying to get over to that one. Yeah, Drake says we need to get me over 1,000 so I can start getting paid. So, but all kinds of different kinds of videos on there, whether it's market stuff or there's videos where I just go through sets and just kind of throw in random funny comments, historical comments, reading the backs of the cards. A lot of people don't even look at the backs of cards anymore and read what it says about the talent. So I like to do that. I have my favorite thing to do, and I've got the best feedback, is interviews. I've been trying to bring different people that have a connection with wrestling, that maybe they collect cards, maybe they are sports card guys and they're not really dabbling with wrestling, but they understand it, and trying to give different perspectives to the wrestling card collectors, because the traditional wrestling card collectors are a whole different type of person than the typical sports cards. So trying to, I guess, teach them and educate people, not only on just wrestling cards and the history of them, but how to kind of navigate markets and understanding, numbered parallels and grading companies and all of these things that seems like common knowledge to sports card people, but wrestling card people don't necessarily get that because it's not always been a thing. So that's the whole reason I started the channel. But yeah, please subscribe. Link in my bio to that, as well as the Worlds Collide podcast, myself and Tony Vella from WrestlingTradingCards.com, which is the #1 place to find wrestling card information. I don't know if a lot of people have talked about it, but PSA actually references the website for anything you send in to grade. So if it is on the checklist on WrestlingTradingCards.com, chances are that PSA will grade it. There's a lot, and they're trying to get more and more checklists up there because they know that PSA is grading these things and that people are out there buying indie sets and all these other things that a lot of times, we talked earlier in the show about how they're kind of ancillary and maybe they're seen as like not really bootleg, but customs or something like that, even though they are legitimate cards. So that's out there. Anyways, we do the podcast, me and Tony Vella, and we, just get together once a week, every Wednesday, available on all popular podcast platforms. Thanks for having me on. And anytime you guys want to do anything and I'm available, I'm up for it.
I'll tell you this. We had somebody else on to talk wrestling. I'm not going to mention any names, but you absolutely crushed him, and you are now the go-to for wrestling.
Thank you.
We are going to catch up. I know that people have been reaching out about some of our these have not been on YouTube. We are going to catch up by this weekend and get everything on. I will go ahead and link your podcast. I'm going to link the WrestlingCard.com too, so that people can find that if they're looking for it. And then I will occasionally share your podcast in our story with a link to your YouTube page so people can find it, because anyone who's interested in wrestling cards should be following.
Yeah, let's get Zhan those YouTube dollars, man.
Yeah,
let's
absolutely.
do that.
Let's do it. Well, we're going to make Reckless Cards community mission is to get you guys over 1,000.
That way you can buy us some Sleepwisers.
All right.
Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. You guys keep up with the great content and having all the great guests. And I loved your appearance on Women with the Hobby the other day. Love Lucas and Tigers and Braun. I mean, look at my profile. I've got the Tiger NFT going. So just keep doing what you're doing. Love it.
Side note, I hold all the Tigers that have been minted with the coffee cup. So when they finally decide to do a coffee with Cage and invite somebody on, they'll get some quality.
Nice.
Or they getting all the damn clout.
All right. See you guys later.
Damn.